Welcome to the video for chapter 22 of the Cambridge Introduction to Sanskrit, which is going to tell you about middle and passive participles in the present and future, several more third-person pronouns, as well as pronominal adjectives. Let's begin with a brief reminder of what we mean when we say middle and passive. Now, the middle voice is a set of verbal forms that are formally different from the active, but identical to the active in their meaning or translation. Their form uses the same stem as active verbs, but different, namely middle endings, e, se, te, and so on. And so we get a contrast of, for example, vadati, meaning he, she, or it says, as opposed to bhashate, also meaning he, she, or it says, but while vadati with the ending third singular ti is active, bhashate with the ending third singular te is middle. The passive voice then has the same meaning as the passive in English, so whereas an active might be something like she sees, the passive counterpart of that would be she is seen. As for passive formation in Sanskrit, we take the passive stem, which consists of the root in zero grade plus ya, and if this verbal root ends in a vowel, then this root final vowel is possibly lengthened or changed. Added to this passive stem, we then have middle endings. So, for example, of shru, meaning to hear, we then have a third singular passive shru ya, te, he, she, or it is heard. So let's look at present middle participles. These are formed of verbs that also in their finite forms normally take middle endings. Remember, some verbs mostly take active endings, others mostly take middle endings. Those that mostly take middle endings in their finite forms also mostly have middle participles. Of thematic verbs, we form these participles by taking the present stem and adding mana. Of athematic verbs, we take the weak present stem and we add ana. So, for example, of dyut, to shine, which is class 1, we take the present stem dyota and then add mana to give us dyota mana, meaning shining. And this is declined just like a normal short a stem, long a stem form. So in the masculine, we'd have the nominative singular dyota manach, in the feminine dyota mana, and in the neuter dyota manam. An example of an athematic present middle participle would be from bhuj, to enjoy, where we take the weak present stem bhunj. Bhuj is class 7, so we add the n in the weak stem, bhunj. And to that we then add ana, giving us bhunjana, enjoying. And that again declines just like a normal short a, long a stem. There's one notable exception, and that is of the verb as, to sit, where we do not have the present middle participle asana that we might expect, but rather we have asina, meaning sitting. Next, the present passive participle. For that you take the passive stem, which consists of the root in zero grade with possible changes if the root ends in a vowel, plus the passive marker ya. And to that you then add the middle participle suffix mana. So this is just like finite passive forms, where you also take the passive stem and add middle personal endings, except that here you add the middle participle suffix mana. So from ni, to lead, we get ni ya mana, being led. Iksh, to see, we get iksh ya mana, being seen. Shru, to listen or to hear, shru ya mana, being listened to or heard. From da, to give, di ya mana, being given, and so on. Notice that passive stems all end in ya. A ends in the thematic vowel a, so all passive stems are thematic, and therefore all of them add mana. None add ana. That is something that you find solely in the middle participle, not in the passive. And finally, the future middle and passive participles. Now, remember that outside the present tense, the middle and passive are formally identical, and therefore the future middle and passive participles also look the same. They are formed by taking the future stem and adding the suffix mana to it. Now, the future stem always is thematic. It always ends in either sya or ishya, which ends in a, the thematic vowel, so it's thematic, and therefore we thus only ever find the suffix mana, never ana. To look at a couple of examples of bhash, to speak, we have the future stem bhashishya and the future middle or passive participle bhashishyamana, which if it's middle means about to speak, or if it's passive means about to be spoken to. Of yud, to fight, we have the future stem yotsya with some internal sandhi, and the future middle or passive participle yotsyamana. If it's middle, it means about to fight. If it's passive, it means about to be fought. And finally, of iksh, to see, we have the future stem ikshishya and the future middle or passive participle ikshishyamana. If it's middle, it means about to see. If it's passive, it means about to be seen. And like all the other suffixes that are formed with ana or mana, these participles are short a or long a stems. Now that we've looked at how these are formed, let's briefly look at how they're used. Mostly, their usage is the same as that of ta participles, which was outlined in chapter 8. So they can be used like nouns, i.e. on their own or substantivized. For example, ikshamanach means the seeing one, or he, the man who sees, in better English. They can be used like adjectives, in which case they would be agreeing with a noun. So for example, ikshamana kanya, the seeing girl, or in better English, the girl who sees. And more rarely than ta participles, but still possible, they can be used like finite verbs, and that would be in sentences where there is no finite verb. Let's look at a few more participle examples, but this time in context. First of all, a present middle participle. Bala, naryach, bhashamanayach, vachanani shrunoti. Bala, the girl. Shrunoti, listens to or hears. Whom or what? Vachanani, the words of whom? The words naryach, of the woman, and the woman is described as bhashamanayach, of the speaking woman. In better English, we would translate this as the words of the woman who is speaking. Then, present passive participle. Tatach sarvebhich pujamanach agachati. Tatach, then, agachati, there comes, pujamanach, the being worshipped one, specifically the sarvebhich pujamanach, the by everyone being worshipped one. And that in better English would be the one, or given that the participle is masculine, the man who is worshipped by all. Then a participle that could be either future middle or future passive. Sena pertanayang yotsyamanan veti. Veti means he knows whom. Senam, the army. And this is the army that is yotsymanam, that is about to fight. Pertanayang, in battle. This could, however, also be he knows or he recognizes the army that is about to be fought in battle. Yotsymanam can be future middle or it can be future passive. Only if we have further context to the sentence can we then decide whether this, in this specific case, is a future middle participle, the army that is about to fight, or a future passive participle, the army that is about to be fought. Then on to the second new thing for this chapter, which is more third-person pronouns. In chapter 20, we encountered the pronoun sachtad, which had its very own set of endings. But there actually are several other pronouns that decline just like sachtad, i.e. that have exactly the same endings, and these are what we'll be looking at now. First of all, there is eshach etad, which is a demonstrative pronoun meaning this or that, which is formed by adding e before the forms of sach or tad. Now, in all the forms of sachtad that begin with t, this e has no further effect. So, for example, we have a masculine accusative singular etam, we have a masculine nominative plural et, and so on. However, in the two forms of sachtad that begin with s, namely nominative singular masculine sach and nominative singular feminine sa, the e causes ruki, and so we don't have e sach and e sa, but e shach and e sha. Next up, the relative pronoun ya, meaning who, what, or which. The uses of this are going to be introduced in chapter 23. Then the question pronoun ka, meaning who, what, which. This has the same endings as sachtad, but with one exception, namely the nominative accusative singular neuter, which is not kad, which is what we might expect, but it is kim. So kim means what. Then we have anya, which means other. Just like sachtad, these pronouns have slightly unexpected stem forms, so forms that would be used in compounds. Of eshach etad, the stem form would be etad. Of ya, the stem form is yad. Of ka, it is kim. And of anya, it is either anya or more rarely anyad. A few examples of that would include something we've seen before, namely tat purusha, the servant of him, his servant. Yat kula, of which family, yat the relative pronoun in its stem form, kula meaning family, and kim arta, for what purpose, consisting of arta, purpose, and kim, the stem form of the question pronoun ka. In addition to pronouns and adjectives, Sanskrit also has something called pronominal adjectives. These are adjectives that are similar to pronouns in their meaning and therefore partly use pronominal endings. So basically pronominal adjectives are between pronouns and adjectives, both in their meaning and in their forms. These are sarva, meaning all, vishwa, meaning all, swa, meaning one's own, and eka, meaning one or single. These have a regular adjectival nominative accusative singular neuter, so we get sarvam, vishwam, and so on, not sarwad or vishwad. But apart from that, they have the same endings as sachtad. So for example, the nominative plural masculine is sarwe or wishwe or swe. The genitive plural would end in esham, so sarwesham, wishwesham, and so on. Then, on top of what we just saw, we have another couple of forms that are declined either just like sarva, so just like the pronominal adjectives you were introduced to a second ago, or they are declined just like regular a, short a, long a stem adjectives, so just like priyach, priya, priyam. And these are para, meaning distant or other, purva, meaning prior or first, and a variety of combinations of either pronominal or prepositional stems plus a comparative or superlative suffix. So for example, ka tara, meaning which of two, anya tara, meaning either of two, ut tama, literally the upmost, so the highest or the most superior, and a number of other forms that are formed just like them. So these decline either like sarva or they decline just like regular adjectives. Once again, this was a fair amount of new material, so the question arises, what should you do now? First of all, you should understand which stems the suffixes ana and mana are added to form the variety of participles that were introduced in this chapter. Secondly, you should memorize the various pronouns and pronominal adjectives as new vocabulary. And then thirdly, as far as pronominal adjectives are concerned, you should be prepared to recognize all of their case forms, no matter whether they have adjectival or pronominal endings. That was it for this chapter. We hope that you found this video helpful, and if you have any comments or suggestions, we would love to hear from you. Please do write to us at rupal@cambridge-sanskrit.org. And now, for your own work on this material, good luck and have fun!